Montana Territory, September 1873. The wind kicked dust across the wooden platform as the auctioneer's voice rang sharp over the murmuring crowd. Men gathered under the noon sun, hats pulled low, boots scuffing dry earth. Near the front, she stood alone, barefoot, trembling, arms crossed tight over her chest like she could hold herself together that way. Adeline Talbot, 22, skin pale under the dirt, dress torn at the sleeve, lips pressed tight to keep from crying. Her wrists bore the marks of rope. She looked like she might run if her legs would let her. "Next up," barked the auctioneer, slapping his hand on the post she was tied to only minutes ago. "One young woman, healthy, can cook, clean, strong enough for field work, caught trespassing where she should not have been. Sheriff says she is to be sold to work off her fine." A few men laughed. One whistled. Adeline flinched. She had not stolen. She had not trespassed. She had run from someone who said he owned her with the ink of a forged contract and a cruel hand. She had escaped into this town only to be thrown behind bars and now paraded like cattle. "No takers?" the auctioneer said, glancing around. "We can start at $20. I will take her." The crowd turned. A tall man stepped forward from the shade where he had been leaning against a rail post. His boots hit the dirt with slow, certain steps. Dust clung to the hem of his duster, and a sun-faded hat shaded his eyes, but when he looked up, the blue in them was clear and steady. "Name's Declan North," he said. "I will pay her fine." The auctioneer narrowed his eyes. "She ain't free, cowboy." I said I will pay." Declan's voice was calm, but there was a heat under it. He pulled a leather pouch from his coat and dropped it into the auctioneer's hand. "Count it." Adeline stared at him. She could not breathe. She did not know this man, did not know why he had done it. But when he turned and met her eyes, something in his expression stopped her from stepping back. He was not smiling. He was not leering. He looked at her like she was a person. The auctioneer spit on the ground. "She's yours now." Declan walked up to her slowly. He did not touch her, just reached into his coat again and handed her a clean kerchief. "You are bleeding," he said. Adeline glanced down. Her lip had cracked in the cell last night. She had not noticed. "I am not going to hurt you," Declan said, soft enough only she could hear. "You can come with me or not. Your choice." Her legs felt like water. Her throat burned. But she nodded. He did not take her hand, just walked beside her, slow, letting her follow at her own pace. The others watched, whispering. A woman buying herself time with a man's coin. That is what they would think. But Declan never looked back at them. He brought her to his horse, tethered behind the old feed store. He helped her up and climbed behind her, careful not to touch more than he had to. They rode north, away from the town, into the hills where the pines grew thick and the air cooled. They reached his cabin by dusk. One room, neat, with firewood stacked high and a creek bubbling not far from the door. He helped her down and handed her a tin cup of water. "You can sleep inside," he said. "I will take the barn." Adeline stared at him. "Why did you do it?" Declan took off his hat, ran a hand through sweat-damp hair. "Because you were scared. And no one did anything. You do not know me. I do not need to." She looked down at the cup in her hand, then at the cabin, then back at him. "I am not a servant," she said. "No," he said. "You are free." Adeline's lip trembled. She looked away fast and nodded. That night, she lay in his bed while he slept on hay in the barn. She did not sleep much. The dark still pressed too heavy. But the door was bolted from inside, and she held a kitchen knife under the blanket just in case. In the morning, he left coffee on the table, already hot. Days passed. She stayed. Not because he asked her to, he never did, but because the quiet here was different than the silence she had known before. It did not feel like waiting for something bad to come. Felt like breathing. Declan worked the land, mended fences, hunted when he had to. He never pressed her for answers. Never touched her unless he had to hand her something. He built her a second bed from pine and old wool blankets. She helped him cook because she wanted to. One morning, she found him sitting on the porch, boot on the railing, carving a piece of cedar. You always do that? She asked, stepping out with a tin of coffee. He glanced up, smiled just a little. It helps me think. What are you making? He held it up. A small horse, rough-shaped but careful. For a girl I used to know. Adeline tilted her head. You have a daughter? No. She died. Years ago. Adeline lowered her eyes. I am sorry. He nodded, looking past her at the trees. You do not have to stay here. I know folks in Helena. Good people. They could help you find something. And go where? She asked. I have nothing. You have dignity. That is something. Her chest tightened. No one had ever said that to her before. Not even her own father. She sat beside him. I do not want to leave. He looked at her, eyes careful. You do not have to say that. I mean it. Declan looked down at the horse in his hand. He rubbed his thumb over the edge, then set it aside. I do not know what you have been through, he said. But you are safe now. No one will ever put a rope on you again. Adeline blinked fast, but the tears came anyway. He reached out slow and touched her hand. Just one hand, his palm warm and rough. She did not pull away. I do not want to be alone anymore, she whispered. Declan's voice dropped low. You are not. She leaned into him, and for the first time in a long time, she let herself believe it. The first frost came early, lacing the grass with silver and painting the window panes in delicate webs. Adeline rose before light, wrapped in a wool shawl Declan had set near the hearth the night before. She made coffee by feel, hands steady now, not from habit but from having learned the rhythm of quiet mornings in this place. Outside, the creek ran slower than it had in September. She could hear the soft thudding of hooves from the barn, where Declan was likely checking the mare that had gone lame 2 days earlier. She walked out with 2 tin cups, the cold biting through her soles where her shoes had worn thin. She found him kneeling near the gate, his breath clouding in the air as he felt along the horse's leg. She's not favoring it as much, he said, not looking up. I brought coffee. He glanced over, nodded once. Thanks. Adeline crouched beside the fence and passed him a cup. The mare snorted and blinked at her, ears twitching. Declan stroked its neck, quiet and thoughtful. You always this gentle with animals? Only the ones that don't try to bite. Adeline smiled faintly. I think she likes you. Maybe, but I think she likes you better. She let you braid her mane yesterday. I needed something to do with my hands. He didn't answer right away. He stood, stiff from the cold, and leaned on the fence rail. You ever work livestock before? No. I was raised in a boarding house. My mother did the books. I served meals, swept floors. After she died, I stayed on as a hand. Until the man who ran it decided I owed him more than I could pay. Declan's jaw tightened. He come after you? He tried. I took his coin box and ran. Figured if I was going to be called a thief, I might as well be one. She shrugged, eyes on the tree lean. Didn't get far? You got far enough. She looked at him, surprised by the certainty in his voice. I mean it, he said. You're here now. That counts. They stood in silence for a while, the only sound the creak of the barn door in the breeze. Then Declan drained his cup and set it on the fence post. I need to ride south today. There's a smith in Deer Hollow who owes me a favor. I've been meaning to collect. Adeline hesitated. Do you want me to go with you? No. It's a long ride and it'll be near dark by the time I get back. I'd rather you stay where it's warm. She nodded, though a small knot of unease lodged in her chest. He hadn't left her alone here before. But she didn't say anything. There's a rifle behind the door, loaded. You remember how I showed you? Yes. Don't open to anyone. Not unless they call my name. She met his eyes. I'll be fine. He tipped his hat, then turned toward the horse, already saddled and waiting. After he rode off, the day passed in fits and starts. She swept the floor, peeled potatoes, hung damp laundry near the fire. By mid-afternoon, the wind had picked up. Branches scratched against the window and the sky darkened with clouds that promised snow. She tried reading from one of the worn volumes in his trunk, poetry, mostly, and a few technical manuals, but she couldn't focus. Her thoughts wandered to the sound of boots on wood, a voice she didn't know calling her name by mistake. She checked the rifle twice, just in case. By nightfall, the wind howled like a wounded thing. She lit every lamp and fed the fire till it roared. Still no sign of him. Then, just as she stood to bolt the door again, she heard hoofbeats. 2 of them. Her fingers tightened on the rifle as she stepped to the window. A lantern swung in the dark, bobbing with each step. Then a voice, low but familiar. "Addie." She threw the bolt back and pulled the door open. Declan stood there, soaked through, holding the reins of his mount and leading a second horse behind him with a broken halter and skittish eyes. "You're late," she said, relief breaking through her chest like splintered ice. He looked exhausted, his coat clinging to his frame, but he managed a tired grin. "Ran into a trapper downriver. His horse spooked and bolted. Took me an hour to catch the damn thing." "Is it his?" "Was. He's gone." Declan stepped inside and closed the door behind him. "Fever," he said. "Been on his own 2 weeks. I gave him half the dried meat and my extra coat. Told him to head for the mission house in Helena." She helped him peel off the wet layers, her fingers brushing his shirt sleeve as she laid the coat near the fire. "You always help everyone who stumbles into your path? Only the ones who look like they've got something left worth saving." Adeline didn't speak. She just set a towel in his hands and turned toward the stove. Later, when he had changed and the stew was warming, she sat across from him at the table, candlelight softening the lines around his eyes. "Do you regret it?" she asked. "Regret what?" "Pulling me out of that crowd." "Paying what you did?" He leaned back, watching her. "No. I only wish I'd come sooner." Her breath caught, but she didn't let it show. "Not much. I've been thinking," he added. "The land behind the cabin, there's space for a garden come spring. Maybe a chicken coop, if someone were so inclined." She folded her hands in her lap, the warmth of the fire brushing her side. "I might be." Declan studied her for a long moment. Then he reached over and set something on the table between them. It was the carved horse, sanded smooth now, polished with beeswax. She touched it with one finger, careful. "It's beautiful," she said, voice hushed. "I thought it should belong to someone who knows what it's like to run," he said, "and still come home." Adeline looked up, and this time she didn't look away. By late November, the hills had gone quiet under the weight of snow. The pine needles sagged heavy with it, and the creek ran slow and narrow as ice crept in from the banks. The cabin sat tucked into the whiteness like it belonged there, smoke curling from its chimney through the still air. Adeline stood near the window. Needle paused mid-stitch as she watched the sky dim pale lavender behind the ridge. She had taken to sewing again, patching shirts, mending seams, shaping scraps of linen into something useful. The work steadied her, let her claim the hours as her own. Declan came in with his shoulders dusted in snow, breath curling as he shut the door behind him with a soft click. "Fence by the north slope gave a little," he said, tugging off his gloves. "Snow bent one of the posts near flat. I'll brace it with timber tomorrow." "You're cold," she said, setting her sewing aside. "Sit. I'll warm cider." He didn't argue, just lowered himself into the chair near the fire and stretched his hands toward the flames. She poured from the kettle, the scent of cloves and apples rising, and handed him a tin cup. "I met your neighbor today," she said as she returned to her seat. "The one who lives down past the ridge with the dark bay mule." "Clem Rourke." Declan raised an eyebrow. "He speak more than 3 words?" "He asked if I was your sister." Declan swallowed a mouthful of cider and gave a short laugh. "And what did you tell him?" "That I wasn't." He didn't answer right away. His eyes traced the flames. "Did that bother you?" she asked, voice lighter than she felt. "No," he said. "Just surprised he asked. Clem's the sort to mind his own." Adeline pulled the thread through her hem, knotting it. "He gave me a jar of honey. Said he had more than he could use." "That's not like him." "Maybe he liked my face." She glanced up, watching him. His gaze was still on the fire, but his fingers tightened around the cup. "I don't think that's it," he said. "What is it, then?" Declan set the cup down and leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "I think folks are starting to see what I already know." Adeline waited, her hands still. "That you're not someone to be pitied," he said. "You've got a mind sharp as a tack, and you don't flinch from hard work. That earns respect out here." She folded the linen neatly and laid it on the table. "And you? What do you see?" He looked at her, long and steady. "Someone I trust with my life." Her breath caught in her throat, but she didn't look away. "I've never had that before," she said softly. "That kind of trust. Not even for my own blood. You do now." The fire popped. Outside, a gust of wind stirred the snow from the cabin roof. She rose and crossed to the hearth, setting another log on the embers. "I want to stay through spring," she said, not turning. "And after, if you'll have me." Declan stood, slow, and stepped behind her. He didn't touch her, just let the space between them speak. "This place is yours as much as mine," he said. "But I don't want you to stay because you feel safe. I want you to stay because you want a life here." She turned then, her hands loose at her sides. "I do." He reached out finally and brushed a curl from her cheek. His touch was careful, reverent. "Then we'll build that life together." She nodded, the corners of her mouth turning upward not from relief, but from something quieter. Certainty. That night, they shared stew by firelight and spoke of the land they'd plant come thaw beans, squash, corn if the soil took to it. She told him about the songs her mother used to hum before supper, and he showed her how to mend a boot sole without splitting the leather. When she lay down, it was no longer in a stranger's space. It was her home now, and the man resting across the room with a rifle near the door wasn't her savior. He was her beginning. By late January, the snow packed deep along the ridge, the kind that held the shape of boot prints for days. The cabin stayed warm with the fire kept high and the walls sealed tight with clay Declan had mixed and pressed in before the cold turned vicious. The world outside had gone white and still, but inside, life ran steady. Adeline sat near the table with a length of muslin in her lap, her brow drawn as she traced a shape with charcoal rough lines of a dress pattern she was trying to draft by memory. She hadn't done it in years, not since she worked beside Miss Elspeth in the back room of the boarding house, but muscle remembered what the mind forgot. Declan came in with wind clinging to his coat and a pair of fresh rabbit skins slung over his shoulder. He hung them by the door and unwrapped the scarf from his neck, his face red from wind bite. "Found tracks near the ravine," he said, pulling off his gloves. "Coyotes, maybe two. Close enough to worry the chickens if we had any. We'll have to build the coop strong come thaw." She stood and crossed to the fire, setting a kettle to warm. "Have you ever tanned hides before?" "Not well. But I watched my uncle do it once. Taught me enough to ruin a few." He glanced toward the skins. "You thinking of making something?" "Mittens," she said. "And boots, if I can figure the pattern right. Never seen a woman draw leather the way you do muslin. I used to think I'd sew for a shop one day. Lace, corsets, traveling coats. Never thought I'd be looking at rabbit fur and thanking the Lord for it. Life changes." He leaned against the table, watching her. Sometimes for the better. She met his eyes, and something passed between them, quiet, steady, understood. That night, a storm rolled through hard enough to shake the shutters. They moved the washbowl and chairs from the drafty wall and laid extra quilts over the windows. Declan trimmed the oil lamp low while Adeline stirred a thick stew that clung to the spoon. They ate side by side near the fire, knees brushing beneath the blanket draped over their laps. "You ever think about letting someone know you're here?" Declan asked, voice low. She looked up from her bowl. "Who would I tell? Maybe someone from before. A friend, neighbor. I left no one behind who'd wonder. That life's gone." He nodded. "I asked because word spreads. I've heard talk in town. A man asking after a woman with dark hair and a southern drawl." Her spoon stilled. "Did he give a name?" "No. Just said he was collecting a debt." Her jaw tightened. "He means to take me back." "He won't." Declan's voice had dropped to something colder than she'd heard from him before. "I won't let him. I'm not something to be fought over." "I know." He set his bowl aside. "But I also won't stand by if someone comes to drag you into a life you didn't choose." She set her spoon down with care. "If he comes, I'll face him. You won't be alone." She reached for his hand beneath the blanket. He didn't flinch. Their fingers threaded together like they'd done it 100 times. The next morning, the storm had passed. Snow lay smooth and deep, untouched but for the trail Declan carved to the spring. Adeline stood in the doorway watching the sky shift to pale blue. He returned with a pail brimming and cheeks stung red. She took it from him and poured it into the pot without a word. There was no need. After breakfast, they worked side by side, Declan chopping kindling, Adeline scraping hides clean. Her hands blistered, but she didn't stop. She liked the ache. It felt like proof. By mid-afternoon, a hawk circled overhead, casting long shadows across the snow. Adeline looked up, shielding her eyes. "We could trap more," she said. "Squirrels, maybe fox. Use the pelts, sell them in spring." "You planning to start a trade?" "I'm planning not to need anyone's charity." Declan chuckled. "That I believe." She wiped her hands on a cloth and turned toward him. "I'm not used to someone letting me be useful. I don't want you to be anything but yourself. I'm still figuring out who that is." Declan stepped closer, snow creaking under his boots. "Then we'll figure it out together." She didn't answer, just looked up at him, eyes steady, and nodded once. That evening, as the light faded, Declan dug out a cedar box from the trunk under his bed. Inside were odds and ends, a compass, a cloth-wrapped bundle of coins, and a small silver ring dulled with age. He held it in his palm for a long moment before walking to the table where Adeline sat, darning a sock. "This belonged to my mother," he said. "She wore it till her hands grew too thin. Said it brought her comfort knowing someone gave it to her with good intentions." Adeline looked at the ring, then at him. "You're giving it to me?" "I am. If you want it." She took it, slow, and turned it in her hand. "I've never had something given with no strings." "Then it's time you did." She slipped it on. It fit her smallest finger. He didn't ask for a promise. Neither did she. But when they went to bed that night, his hand resting warm over hers beneath the quilt, it felt like something had settled that would not come loose again. The thaw came slow. By March, the snow had begun to pull back from the slopes, revealing the black earth beneath in uneven patches. Water ran fast in the gullies, carving new lines through the frost-hardened ground. The cabin creaked with the shift in weather, sap rising in the pine beams, and the air inside smelled faintly of damp wood and early grass. Adeline stood at the edge of the clearing, sleeves pushed up, hands dirty to the wrists. She'd been turning soil with a short-handled spade, pulling up stones and laying them near the fence line. Her cheeks were flushed and her hair had come loose from its braid. Declan stepped out with a pail of nails and a hammer looped through his belt. "You've broken 3 blades trying to dig that plot," he said. "You planning to find gold under there?" "I won't know until I get the rocks out." He leaned against the post and watched her work. "Could put the rows closer to the barn. Soil's softer there. I like the light here." She wiped her brow with the back of her hand. "Besides, when it's done, I want to see it from the window." "You think of everything," he said. "I try to." She paused, then, resting the spade on her shoulder. "You ever think about what you'd be doing if I hadn't shown up?" Declan squinted toward the hills. "I'd be patching this fence slower, talking to myself more, probably growing stiff from sleeping alone. You made room for me when you didn't have to. I didn't feel like I had a choice. Not in the way that matters." She stepped toward him, brushing dirt from her palms. "I want to be your wife." He didn't move, but something in his face shifted, softer, lighter. "I want to be your husband," he said. "No ceremony? We can have one if you want. Or we can speak vows beside the creek and call it done. I don't need a preacher. I just need you to mean it." Declan reached for her hand, the one not calloused from digging, and held it steady between both of his. "I mean it," he said. "Every day I wake up with you beside me, I mean it." They married beside the creek the following morning. Just the two of them, boots in the damp grass, fingers laced as the water rushed by below. He spoke first, voice low but sure. "I vow to protect what we build, to listen, to work beside you, to never treat your strength like something borrowed. I vow to be your man." She answered without hesitation. "I vow to be your home, to tend what we plant, to meet you where you are, and never look back in fear. I vow to be your wife." He kissed her then, slow and certain, the way a man kisses a woman he's waited his whole life to find. They spent the rest of the day hauling logs to brace the new fence line. She laughed when he dropped one on his toe. He teased her for cursing under her breath when the wheelbarrow tipped. By dusk, they ached in every limb, but the fence stood straight and the sky stretched wide above them, pale gold with evening. In the weeks that followed, they built up the garden rows, planted seeds in neat lines, and started laying stones for a coop. Adeline traded a bundle of cured rabbit fur for a pair of hens from a rancher's wife who'd heard about the woman who stitched her own boots and wouldn't take handouts. The hens settled quickly, and by April they were laying. One morning, Declan returned from a trip into Helena with a parcel wrapped in brown paper and tied with twine. He set it on the table without a word. Adeline opened it to find 2 bolts of calico, one cornflower blue, the other soft cream with tiny green sprigs. She ran her fingers over the fabric, slow. "You remembered," she said. "You said you used to dream about sewing for a shop. Thought maybe you'd want to sew for yourself now." She leaned across the table and kissed his cheek. "I'll make a Sunday dress. And then another for planting days." He grinned. "You'll look good in both." By midsummer, the garden had taken hold. Beans twined up stakes and squash spread fat-leaved across the soil. The coop stayed dry through the storms and the hens scratched happily in the shade. Adeline kept a ledger of their stores and Declan carved new handles for the tools with a careful hand. One late July evening, they sat on the porch, her head resting on his shoulder, the scent of sun-warmed pine thick in the air. Fireflies blinked low along the edge of the clearing, and the first cricket song rose from the tall grass. "I never thought I'd have this," she said. "I never thought I'd get to keep it," he answered. She lifted her head and looked at him, the last of the light catching in her eyes. "We built it together." He nodded. "And we'll hold on to it." A year passed. Then another. The winters came and went, and the land bore them fruit. They built a second room onto the cabin, planted more rows, and traded pelts and eggs for flour and cloth. Word of a new rail line coming west reached them, but they stayed rooted. The world could stretch and change, but they had all they needed here. Adeline taught herself to bind books, stitching paper with thread and leather. Declan cleared a patch of land nearer the creek and planted apple saplings. At night, they read aloud by lamplight, her voice carrying the words while his hand rested over hers, warm and steady. Their love never grew loud, but it deepened like river stone smoothed by time, unmoved by storms. In the 4th spring, beneath the apple trees just beginning to bloom, she pressed his hand to her belly and smiled. He didn't speak, but his eyes filled as he nodded. That summer, the cabin rang with new sounds: a baby's cry, the hush of lullabies, soft words spoken between 2 people who had come through fire and chosen each other again and again. And as the sun rose over their land each morning, it found them there, a man and a woman, and the life they had built with open hands. Nothing borrowed. Everything earned. Everything held.